because YouTube randomly started playing this video to me of this guy who I'm never really watched any of his stuff. I don't know why they suggested it, but he was talking about this false teaching in the New Age community of follow your bliss, and how if something is stretching you and pushing you and, you know, really stretching your capacity for whether it's understanding or endurance or problem solving or whatever it is, that it's a false teaching, that you shouldn't stick with that thing. Like how I was talking about, you know, the deep end and studying from the deep end, like observing it or studying in the deep end, that there is a blessing there. So years ago, my closest neighbor was in her 90s, and she told me to go to this Foundation of Light for a morning meditation, a Sunday meditation. And this is what happened. So it took me a little while, just as an aside, it took me a little while to understand the structure of rural life, because I grew up on Long Island in a village where, you know, things were laid out and mapped out to support what the needs of the people that live there are, right? So I left that scenario, traveled around the country, then settled in the Catskill Mountains in Woodstock for a little while. When we were living there, it was still a village, but it was, you know, in the Catskill Mountains, so it was a little bit more stretched out. And that's where I got a taste of, you know, you're going to be driving a lot more, you're going to be in the car more, covering more ground, going here and there. But it was still like a general radius. And then when we moved out to pasture, where there is so much open space out here, if you want to go to town for your groceries, organic groceries, and that's 1 hour of driving round trip, right? So it was a whole different thing. And I quickly realized that there was a lot of churches in our little small town, but there wasn't hardly anything else. So we had a little library, and that was it. And there was like no community center. There was no community network that didn't operate within these churches. And so I was always kind of lonely. She was in her 90s. I had a bunch of, you know, small children. So we would talk, and I loved her. She was one of my close friends up here. It's been kind of lonely out here without her, because she passed when she was 97 and a half. And we used to, right up until the end, you know, have deep conversations, not so much about the teachings, but just about all types of things. She was really interesting. So very, very smart woman, and unusual, right? A Renaissance type woman, different. And her children didn't live on the East Coast. Anyway, all that to say. So she would, you know, give me ideas. And I always thought, you know, I should just explore her idea. So I was thinking, you know, Foundation of Light, so it's kind of like a copycat of what churches offer, right? Just to people who are not one denomination or the other. I looked into it and found out that when this Sunday meditation was, it took me a long time from finding out to actually going, because I had small children, and I think maybe I had 3 at the time. And that was like the thing that finally pushed me to be like, look, I need, and it's always, you know, it's not just like an hour. It's always, I need 2 hours, I need 3 hours to get away and go do something. And that made the pressure of getting away harder, because it was never a quick thing, and I was never nearby. You know, it was a great distance. 20 miles seems like a very great distance when you're, you know, stepping out of a scene. So I finally got my act together and I went. And so there was this whole, you know, there were some elderly people in the room, like that were a little bit younger than my neighbor, who's in her 90s, right? So there were women in their 80s, there were men in their late 70s, and many people like in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, right? So I'm maybe 29. I wish I could remember how old I am, how old I was. But yeah, if I would have been 28, like if I had 3 small children, something like that. So I'm in there so overjoyed and hopeful, like I'm alone. I'm in this beautiful building because as far as architecturally, it is a gorgeous facility. It's small, but it's really beautiful and well designed and everything, you know. So I'm all like walking in there, and they all know each other. So there's this feeling of like fellowship and, oh, hello. And it turns out that the man who was leading it, I did know him because he was my dentist. And so he was a very kind man. He was like over 6'6". He was like this gentle, this gentle man. He didn't use mercury fillings. Like, it was very nice. So anyway, he leads this meditation. So I'm all there, right? Like, I'm so there for this meditation. I'm open, willing, like, what are we here? Provide some guidance, right? Because I was always feeling like something was needing to be refined in me, because I didn't know what to do with all of the teachings that I had an affinity for, an ability to understand on a very small level, enough to know that this is really something of extreme importance, weight, and merit, and I'm not going to ignore it just because I don't understand it, like I had talked about the deep end, right? So he's leading this meditation, and the thing is like, okay, we're going to talk about something that is a heavy burden on your heart. What is weighing down your mind? What is something that is just so hard for you to manage, and what are you holding on to, right? And then he does this whole guided meditation, and then we're supposed to like identify it and like bless it and like let it go. And I'm thinking like, oh no, I'm not letting this go. Like, how can I even explain to these people? Right over here is this whole huge metaphysical library. There's not a single book in there about, anything that I've learned from the Nation of Islam in totality, right? Like there's some glimmers of ancient wisdom as interpreted through this person, that person, but nothing in terms of what the mathematical theology of the Nation of Islam had shown me, right? Like shown a light towards me. So I'm sitting there, it's a complete wash. I am not relaxing during this meditation. I'm sitting here thinking like, how would I ever explain to these people? How would I ever talk to these older metaphysical people who think they have it like so figured out about like the new age and like all this stuff? Like, how would I ever talk to these people? Would they ever understand me? Like my mind is someplace completely different, though my body is looking like I'm doing the meditation. So then afterwards, they break the meditation. They're all kind of in sync in their fellowship vibe, right? They're all there. They know exactly what they're doing. They're growing in their whole, way. And not to put them down, but like they had a flow. I was not in the flow. So they go around the room, not asking people to give every detail, because then it would be like, 7 hours later, but to just really express like, what was your experience? How did you feel, right? So they go through a couple people. I'm kind of like near the end of the circle. Everybody is compliant, right? They did the exercise. They did it exactly. There's smiles, recognition, like, oh yes, that was like, oh, thanks for that. That's such a good share, like that kind of thing, right? So then they come to me and they ask me, how was your experience with the meditation? And I said, it was really interesting, because I get what you're saying. I identified something that is really weighing on me, something that is weighty, and I'm having trouble comprehending it. I never know what to do about it or with it in totality. But the one thing I know is that if I let it go, that's the wrong thing to do. And so then immediately everyone's facial expression changes. Everyone is like visibly uncomfortable. My dentist, who's a very kind man, and I'm a client of his in his fancy alternative practice, right? So he's like, Courtney, you are the youngest person in this room. He doesn't talk so high, but he does have a certain tone of like very comforting dentist tone. You're the youngest person in this room. By far, actually, by a lot. You're the youngest person in this room by a lot. And are you trying to tell us, and then it was like this condescending smirk on everyone's face, are you trying to tell us that you came across wisdom so great that you would rather go through like inner turmoil and stress yourself out and try to hash out understanding than to just let it go? I think you misunderstood the directions. And I said, no, like I got it. It was just in me. I'm not able to do that. So it was clarifying, right? Like it was a good exercise for me. I'm just not able to carry out the directions as you instructed, because I'm not talking about an argument. I wasn't thinking about a relationship. I was speaking about the supreme wisdom as revealed to us by Master Fard Muhammad, who came here by himself on July 4th, 1930, who raised up the most honorable Elijah Muhammad and taught him face to face for 3.5 years, night and day, day and night. They were as close as the jugular vein. And I was not able to just say, yeah, I'm going to let that go. And come here? Come here to be directed where you have no childcare for meditation? What are you offering me? That was always the thing with this, the observant outsider, right? So I'm always like ticking boxes off in my head, like, so what's the exact offer here, right? So what is even the equation that you think you're putting together? Like how is this even comparable, right? Like, let go what you have been praying for your entire youth. The questions you've been asking got answered in a very unusual, unexpected way, and just let it go because it's making your life difficult. And I'm like, I was always difficult. Like I was always the person who had, the answer that you couldn't say it was wrong necessarily all the time, which, sometimes it was, but like thought differently, looked at the problem differently. And so my thing was just like, what a risk, right? Like divine risk assessment is my gift, or, divinely informed risk assessment is my gift, like that risk assessment. And then everything else, right? Like that's what I'm always doing in every situation. So I'm sitting there thinking like, yeah, you don't really understand what you're asking because it's not exactly an inviting circle for me who has very little education, in the theology of the Nation of Islam, other than to know, wow, hold up, like this is a really different teaching for all of humanity. Why? Because if you really understand what's being taught, there's something for everyone, because Master Fard Muhammad had a Caucasian mother and a black father, meaning there is something in the universal teachings that he brought where there is a remedy for both people, and this is not something that we can ignore, that we can let go because we're uncomfortable. And it was just such a eye-opening experience to go through. And I wrote this, I right before I kind of dropped out and had that illness experience, I had written the podcast episode called Labyrinth, where, because there was a labyrinth at this New Age center, the Foundation of Light. There was a labyrinth up there. There was a schoolhouse, there's a library, there's all these components and things. And I always thought, I should tell that story. So I wrote the whole podcast, never recorded it, and then YouTube just kind of, since I've been on here a little bit more, was like, hey, here's this like random guy talking about how it's deceptive intelligence and false teaching to just say follow your bliss. Like that's absolutely a lie. And basically he was saying stay in the deep end, stay uncomfortable, get to be a stronger swimmer. Figure out how to improve your skill and stay there. And that's where the blessing is. That's where the growth is. All right. So I'm going to end here. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And I will see you next time. This is part 4 of my 67 posts of appreciation for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's 67 years of service in the Nation of Islam for his 89th birthday. I was just going to put up a post, saying happy birthday and, like sharing some really significant things. And then I got the impulse to not let myself off the hook so easy and to really to commit to doing these videos for 67 days. So anyway, this is day 4, and thanks for joining me. I appreciate you watching. All right, peace.